In this video, we'll talk about why it's important to include sufficient context in your essay and how to do it effectively. Let's begin by thinking about what information you would typically share when introducing two people who don't know each other. You might say something like, "Jamie, this is my friend Elena. We know each other from summer camp." Or, "Mom, this is Mrs. Thompson. She's my math teacher from last year." When you introduce two people, you want to make sure that they have enough information about each other to make a relevant connection. Just like you need to give some context when introducing people to each other, you also need to give context when introducing new ideas, authors, or texts in a piece of academic writing. This will add ethos, credibility, and authority to your writing, both for you and the sources that you're using. It will also aid your reader in understanding the points and who or what you're referring to. This will be particularly important as you move into selecting your own sources and texts that your reader may not be as familiar with. Keeping in mind that you are writing for a general academic audience, you should be writing as if your reader is not an expert on existentialism or the stranger. Let's take a look at a non-example. Each day, human beings must face a choice: to bear witness and try to ease the suffering of others, or to carry on with our lives as though nothing is wrong. In the text, Wiesel says that indifference is not only a sin but a punishment. A writer or reader who is not familiar with this text would be confused. What text? Who's Wiesel? Taylor is a young woman on the run from what she initially sees as the stifling imprisonment of motherhood. Who's Taylor? Are we still talking about the same text? Still feeling confused. However, as Taylor spends more time with Turtle, who's Turtle? What are you talking about? When we introduce new ideas, new texts, or new characters without any context, it can be really confusing for the reader. In the example, you'll see that the author has added in quite a bit more context in order to give the reader more idea, more background information about what we're talking about. Holocaust survivor and esteemed author, speaker, and activist Elie Wiesel. In this sentence, we understand clearly who Elie Wiesel is. Instead of just saying in the text, we say his landmark 1999 speech, The Perils of Indifference. We know what kind of text, when it was published, what the title is. Similarly, in her 1988 novel The Bean Trees, author Barbara Kingsolver. Now we know where Taylor comes from. We know what kind of text. We know the full title, the author's full name, as well as the year it was published. When you write like this, you give your reader a lot more information and background knowledge. Again, assuming that you are writing for a general academic audience that doesn't know everything about your texts, isn't an expert on what you're writing about. Finally, we give a little bit more information about the characters. Taylor Greer, we give her first and last name, and then briefly introduce that she is the main character of the novel, and a little bit more information about Turtle, who is an abandoned child. When we add in this context, it's much easier for the reader to follow along. We're not making assumptions that the reader knows what we're talking about. Let's take a look at some examples on how we give context. You can include the first and last names of an author or character, as well as the full title, the first time you mention them in a piece of writing. Make sure that you're clarifying pronoun reference when you're talking about something or someone for the first time. You shouldn't use words like she or it or they or he if it's not clear who you're talking about. You can use an introductory phrase like Holocaust survivor and esteemed author, speaker, and activist in order to give your reader some context about who this person is. You can use an appositive, where you insert more information after the name. This section highlighted in yellow is an appositive. You can use informational sentences that give a little bit more context about what each person is talking about and where. You can also include a brief summary. Most of your essay should be evidence and analysis, but you do need to give a little bit of summarizing in order for the reader to understand what you're talking about and what you're referring to. So let's take a look at some examples. If you wrote a sentence like, Meursault is indifferent when she dies, this can be confusing for someone who doesn't know who Meursault is or who she is. You'll want to add the context of who Meursault is and who has died. Your revised sentence would look like this. Meursault, the main character of The Stranger, is indifferent when his mother dies. When we write like this, our reader has more information about who we're talking about. If we've written something like, in the text it says, we're going to substitute it for the author's name and the text for the actual title. We're using multiple texts for this essay, so we want to make sure it's clear which one we're talking about. Something like, in existence precedes essence, existentialist thought, Austin Klein writes. With this, we have the full title and the author's full name. One last example. Camus was a major figure in the philosophical movement of existentialism. Let's add in his first name and the title of the book that we've been reading. Author of The Stranger, Albert Camus. This again helps give our reader more context and understand who and what we're talking about. Next, start thinking about how you're going to apply this to your own essay. Make sure that you're including context, full names, full titles, and brief summaries or explanations every time you introduce a new character, a new author, a new text, or a new idea. Don't make assumptions that your reader understands everything that you're talking about. Make sure that you're giving them enough information to follow along with you. Once you have done this, continue revising, editing, and polishing your essay.